Hey everyone, Bri Seeley here, the Entrepreneur Coach. Welcome back to another episode. Today's episode is particularly poignant for me. Amber is someone that I met in 2018. I think our first conversation was August 2018, and I will never forget it because I was back in LA, packing up my apartment, moving all my stuff into storage, and I remember having a call with Amber literally in my empty living room. It's been miraculous to know Amber over the last 5 years. And I'll tell you why. Everyone knows that I say in the intro to this podcast, like, we don't do success porn here. This is not a rags to riches podcast. And Amber has gone from being near bankruptcy when I met her in 2018 to now having a business where she just had her first 6-figure month. There is some really juicy stuff that we can dive into to show what actually has to happen to make that switch. Today's episode on the surface, theoretically success porn, but I want to dive in really deep to truly understand what shifts had to be made. And I specifically want to talk about the shifts that were made within her to go from one reality to a radically different reality. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Coach podcast. I'm the Entrepreneur Coach, Bri Seeley. My mission is to help female entrepreneurs like you have the audacity to believe in the inevitability of your success, then to gather the resources, tools, and knowledge you need to create your most aligned and profitable pathway to your vision of success. This podcast is all about providing you with a nitty-gritty behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. Forget the success porn and the rags to riches stories. Each episode will pull back the curtain and share the reality of entrepreneurship. I cannot wait to be part of your journey. Amber Fries is the founder of Sound Ed Therapy with a team of 50 professionals who provide therapeutic services, including speech-language pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, and vision therapy to online schools and directly to families. Amber has been a speech-language pathologist since 2003 and a business owner since 2018. Amber has built her teletherapy company by offering some of the highest compensation in the industry and encouraging contractors to know their worth and set boundaries around their time and energy. Sound Ed offers the flexibility to set their own schedule and take time off as needed, which creates deeply satisfied contractors who provide the highest quality services. Their team of 50-plus contractors includes professionals with decades of experience. Several are also university professors, and a few even hold PhDs. Please help me welcome Amber Fries to the podcast. Hello.
Hey, Bri. This is actually so surreal for me. As you know, my first exposure to you was listening to you being interviewed on a podcast. I just think my life and yours too probably are so vastly different from where we were at that time. And then that was when that was probably spring of 2018 when I was listening to all your podcasts and reading your book. One particular one stuck in my mind, and I know that I was painting a bedroom in the home that I had used to own, getting it ready to sell. Something clicked in my mind listening to you that was just like, I can do this. I'm ready to take this risk, jump into the next segment of my life. We had our call in August of 2018. I had moved into a smaller house in a new city with my kids at that time. The other house was for sale. It didn't sell for a long, long time. And so I was paying a mortgage and paying rent on the new place. But when I hired you as a coach at that time, it was really just to help me be able to make enough money to pay those bills at that time and just to survive. Thank goodness that I didn't file for bankruptcy and I didn't give in to the excuses. If someone wants an excuse not to do something, they can generally find them. And I could have listed out 20 excuses. I'm a mom of 7. I've given birth. I've adopted. I've got a stepdaughter now. A couple of my kids have some health issues that require, lots of appointments. I built the business during COVID while homeschooling my kids. But I think the important thing to do when you have all these excuses and fears of reasons why you can't do something is to kind of take those excuses and turn them around and make them the reason why you want to do it.
Could you give us a quick example of maybe one that you worked with and that you flipped to become the reason why rather than the excuse?
I think, at first starting the business, I actually was asked to start the business by the school that I worked with. And at first I pushed it away just because I told myself, that I didn't have any business experience, that I would be just too busy. I was in the middle of, I had gotten divorced, but about to move and make a transition in with my fiance at that time. And I could have just told myself that I was too busy. But I knew in my heart that I didn't want to go work somewhere for 40 hours a week and be away from home. I'm really sort of a homebody and I work better at home. And so I knew that that's really what I wanted, and I didn't want to be driving back and forth and commuting. I think with that, we can tell ourselves that we're too busy or we're not capable of doing it, but we just have to know deep inside that we are, and we can push through and sort of get to the other side of that.
Okay, we're all too busy with everything. And whether it's that you said yes to this or no to this, you'd still be too busy on either end. One of the questions I always like to ask is, what would I rather be busy with? Like you just said, would I rather be busy driving back and forth, commuting, dealing with all this stuff, having to take time off from a job to try and help my kids with their appointments? Or would I rather be busy building my legacy? And I'm sure, as we'll get to now, also your kids' legacies, because at least one of your kids has become an employee of your company. That question of what would I rather be busy doing is a really good one that you kind of asked yourself without asking yourself.
Right. And now when I look back on it, I can see it so much clearer now. And I know that I would never be willing to go back to that. I know that this situation works out way better. Like you said, my son was living with me at the time and, COVID happened and he was in college. So it was kind of like, well, is he going to go out and get a job in the middle of quarantine? And one of the things I was going to talk about in this podcast is knowing when to ask for help. But I'm kind of a poor example of that because when I started the first year that I was doing it and I was trying to do everything myself, well, my husband and my son both saw me staying up late at night, entering all these things into the computer. And so they jumped in to help me. When he did, he's just so much better at it. He was actually, going to school for business and learning about Excel spreadsheets and how they all work together and everything. And so his knowledge quickly far exceeded my knowledge. He's been instrumental to the growth that we have right now.
So I happen to know that when you started this business, your only goal was to make $2,000 extra per month for yourself, right? I just learned a few weeks ago from you, right, that you just had your first and second six-figure month.
Yeah, we got the numbers for November, and we made it in November as well.
It's 70 degrees right now, y'all, and I just got chills. So I'm so happy for you. Okay, so we just talked about the mindset of working for someone else to starting your own business. So now you've started your own business. Your mindset is, okay, I just want to make an extra $2,000 a month. And now you have 50 contractors and are making over $100,000 a month. What was the shift like that for you? Where was the tipping point for you to even realize that this was possible for you? And how did you adopt that and say yes to it?
I don't know when I realized that it was possible. I think I just kept trying some things and it worked. I hired my first 3 contractors and they worked. And I'm always, I don't know, there's just something where I'm always kind of biting off more than I can chew and taking a little bit of risk. I haven't always been that way, but honestly, the last 10 years or so, there's been a mindset shift for me about that and realizing that the fears and the blocks that I think that I have, they're not real. Realizing that and just saying what the heck, let's try it. Let's see if it works. What's the worst that can happen? I have to go out and get a job, which is what I would have been doing anyways. It's just telling myself, don't focus on the worst possible scenario, but focus on the best possible. And usually that's how it works out. And if it doesn't, it's not that big of a deal. You just go back to the drawing board and start again.
Did you know your first 6-figure month was coming? Was it planned? Was it purposeful? Or was it just oh, we're here now?
It was sort of purposeful. I would say I started planning it last year. It's one of those things, kind of the more money you make, the more you realize that you need to make in order to make what you want to happen. Last year at this time, I was about $60,000. And so that's the increase that we've had. But there were just some different things happening in my life. One of them was my daughter-in-law, who also works for me now, was a special education teacher who was getting her degree in school psychometry, but she was very frustrated in working in the classroom. I knew I wanted her to work for me. And then I also had a colleague from the school who was no longer working from the school reach out to me and want to work for me. And I kind of knew that I wanted to create these dream jobs for them, but I wouldn't be able to do it without a lot of growth. It was a really big risk taking them on and saying, yes, I'll pay you this much. But I knew that with them on the team that we could increase the numbers. So that's when we started strategizing on making it happen.
I'm really interested to hear how you approach risk. This is a conversation that I have a lot with people. And kind of like you talked about, you looked at the risks of, okay, what's the worst that could happen? How do you navigate that conversation within yourself? What is it about your willingness to say yes to these risks?
It's kind of always been inside of me that was willing to take risk. But like I said, I would kind of stuff it back inside because I was trying to behave like everybody thought I should be behaving. My mom doesn't even truly understand what I do right now. And I don't know if it's even worth explaining to her. It's just so far out of what was normal for her. There's a bit of a daredevil in me and a bit of I do want to see if I can accomplish that thing. And then, this isn't something that's unique to me. We all, I feel like, have this voice inside of us that's like, yes, you can do that. If you will just stop thinking about all those things you think could go wrong and think about what strengths you have inside of you to make it happen, you know that you can.
Let's go back then and talk about, so one of the keys to your growth and success has been knowing when to bring on help. Like you said, you accidentally brought on your son and your husband started helping a little bit. Those first hires, how did they help you to be able to then even expand into the next hires or even these most recent hires that you just talked about?
If you stay busy doing the work that needs to be done just on a day-to-day basis, you're never going to envision what growth you want to have and where you want it to go. You're just going to keep achieving it, just like you were working for somebody else and just staying on the hamster wheel. Hiring somebody to do those things for you that probably they're faster at, probably they're better at, that just opens up more time for you to spend meditating, journaling, walking. All of those things are critical for success. And when I'm not doing those things enough, I can totally feel it. You've got to have people to help carry the load. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck and you're not going to go anywhere.
It's the difference I talk about between being the worker bee and being the queen bee. Like you said, having that space, because you're the visionary. You're guiding the entire, everything that's happening in the company is coming through and from you. And if you're just on the ground getting shit done every day, you don't have the space to be that big picture thinker. I think it's in the last year and a half, you've tripled the company, right?
Yeah.
We worked together again. It's the spring of 2022. And at that point, you were going from one contract to two.
Right.
Now you've gone to three.
Yeah. And we've got more in the works already.
I was going to wait till the end to ask what was next for you, but come on.
And it is every time. It's like I said, I bite off what I think might be more than I can chew. And I do have to spend some time working more than I want to work to kind of get over the hill and get things balanced out. It's not like I don't get bogged down in the work, and it's not like I don't get overwhelmed still. I do. I just know that I can get through it, or I can ask somebody for help and get through it, or I can find a YouTube video, because there were a lot of things that I didn't know. Every time I apply for a business license in another state, it's a whole new thing that I have to figure out, and I can get very overwhelmed with that. But you just know that you'll get through it, and then things will balance out again, and the workload will shift.
Looking at where you were in 2020, 3 years ago now, from that point when you weren't hiring, what do you feel like are the signs to tell you like, hey, it's time to hire again? What do you look out for now that you didn't know to look out for back then that helps you be in that growth mode?
Well, I pay a lot of attention to how much time I'm spending at the computer and how I'm feeling about it. If I get to where I'm not enjoying it, then that's a clear sign that like somebody else needs to be doing this. I just hired somebody to redesign the website and sort of like a creative branding overhaul. And it feels so good because I had told myself like I can do this, and I built the original website, but it was just a lot of work. And so it just feels so good to like just turn that over to somebody else and know that they'll take care of it. Actually, I did your reset video a week or so ago, and you mentioned like listing the things that you don't enjoy. So I've been doing that, and then I've been thinking about, okay, who can do these? Keeping a list of that, and I guess just my overall stress level and my overall feelings about things, or if I'm taking on a new project. When I knew that we were going to take on another school this year, I knew that I would have to have another administrator to help, kind of just looking at the size of the project and going like, okay, like in order to get there, we're going to have help.
Talk to us quickly. You briefly just mentioned it. What do you feel like your average stress level is?
Gosh, it's so much better this year than it even was last year. It's so much lower. And that honestly, the stress last year was my own fault. I had a contractor who kept me busy every single day. I let it go when I let it go. And now I've learned to let the people go that are causing stress. Knowing when to stop dealing with somebody and move on, that's important. The more money I'm earning and the more schools we work with, somehow my stress level has gone down every year.
So many people think like when they get to that level and they're like, okay, if I want to double my business, I have to also put in double the time. Therefore, I'm going to be working more. I'm going to be way more stressed. I'm going to be less able to enjoy my life. And what I hear you saying is the bigger your business has gotten, the less those things have actually happened. What do you think accounts for that shift?
Honestly, that was one of my hesitations when I deciding to start the business was like, I don't want to work at the level of what I thought a business owner would have to work at. I was already working with you a little bit at the time, had reframed some of the principles around work in my mind and knew that I wasn't willing to do that. As the business has grown, I think that's always something that I keep in check because it matters to me to have that free time and not feel rushed. I don't do good under a lot of pressure. I've realized that a lot of the pressures that I perceived were there were actually, I was putting them on myself. And so now I've learned to identify those and let them go and say, I don't need this in order to succeed. I don't need something pressuring me, and just being okay with spending my time not busy sometimes.
Yeah, I know that was one element that we talked about when we were working together last year, was this idea that you should be taking walks every single day, and that there should be a ton of spaciousness in your calendar every single day, and kind of breaking that. I don't know if it's an addiction or just like a mental paradigm around this, like, well, if you're busy, you're important, or if you're busy, you're doing good work, or if those kind of like cultural narratives that go along with like, well, if your calendar's busy, how many people have we ever talked to that are, you see them and you're like, how are you? And they're like, oh, I'm just so busy. And you're like, that's not the flex you think it is.
Right. And I have to remind myself of that every single day.
I kind of joked a little bit earlier, like, what's next for you? I'm assuming that there's more coming and that you're going to continue growing the business. What does growth continue to look like from this point?
Well, we kind of have a lot of inside growth with the schools that we work for, all connected under an umbrella company. Some of that growth just happens organically, like other schools here that we have this service available and they reach out to us. Like I said, all of that's within one companies. We really want to expand into other schools. You've told me this before, like not put all my eggs in one basket. So we want to get some other baskets out there. So that's why we're revamping the website, and we're going to work on some marketing emails, which I've never had the need to do that before, or even think that I had the need to do that before. We're starting to work on that and develop our brand so that we can reach out to other schools and just kind of broaden our reach a little bit instead of like expanding out like a spider web.
So if you know that's the goal, how are you managing this? Like as the CEO, as the leader, you've kind of hit this massive threshold that the majority of female business owners never hit. How do you stay aligned through this growth?
Well, I have a lot of support. My husband is, even more excited about the business than I am. And one of our big goals is for him to, of course, leave his job and come work for me.
So every time I see Amber and Eric, I look at him and I'm like, so when's she going to retire you? And I say it jokingly, but I mean, why not?
Yeah. And I tell him I'm going to need him one of these days just to manage my money. That's the plan.
Love it.
So, keeping a support system for sure, keeping people around me who I can talk to about things, and brainstorm with. But then also, and this one is the hardest for me, is giving myself time when I'm not thinking about the business, going on weekend trips, or we're hoping to maybe take a trip in January somewhere out of the country, but just to give myself the rest that I need. I also sleep a lot. I'm like an in bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock person. I got to give myself all the rest that I can for sure.
Well, any last thoughts that you wanted to share or close with before we wrap?
I'm so appreciative that I discovered you at the time that I did, and for our relationship and our friendship along the way. My life right now looks so incredibly different than it did 5-6 years ago. It just amazes me. And I want to tell anybody out there, like, if you're not content in your life or in your job or your day-to-day life, envision how it could be different and envision what you want it to be like, and then start taking the steps to be there, because you really can. You can make some big shifts in a quick amount of time when you focus on it.
Every time I think about you or see you, or I don't know, drive by your house, I always am just like blown away at what you have created. And I think it is just such a huge testament to your commitment to not staying where you were. Like you said, you had a choice to file for bankruptcy. You had a choice to take that path. The fact that you made the choice to start taking steps towards this kind of unknowingly. I mean, when you started your business, this was not your goal at all.
Right.
And you just keep showing up for the next level and for the next step. And when you were at capacity, you did what you needed to figure out the next growth step.
Every time I made the expansion with the business, it feels like too much. Every time I agree to take a contract with another school, it feels like too much. Fears that jump into my head, but it never is too much. It always works out. And it's just like the universe just brings it to me at the rate that I need it.
It has just been absolutely remarkable. And I know I'm not by any means on the inside, but it has been remarkable to witness. And so Amber announced, I hosted a mixer a few weeks ago, and she announced in the mixer in front of everyone that it was her first 6-figure month. And I had no idea. And I'm sitting in front of these 30 women freaking out. I wanted to actually close by sharing something personal. You've actually really inspired me. I might start crying. So it was November 20th that I learned about this for Amber. And I just kept sitting with I'm so fucking happy with for her. And I want to do that. Why haven't I gotten there in my business yet? I want to do that in my business. I sat down last week and started running numbers because I'm currently filling the mastermind. And I did my numbers and I was like, I'm going to be $13,000 away from my first 6-figure month. And then I was like, what could I sell for $13,000 that I could have my first 6-figure sales month? So It's not in stone yet. It's not done yet, or maybe it is, but I just wanted to share with you, December may be my first 6-figure sales month. And I mean, I think a huge part of it is hearing that you did it. So I just want to say thank you for showing up and taking this journey for the last 5 years, because I know there are other multiple women in your field and in our community that are very inspired by you. But part of why I wanted to bring this conversation forward is because seeing you do this is helping other women step into their greatness and saying, I want to do that for myself too, and I deserve to do that for myself too.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's never been like an intention of mine, but it does just happen along the way. You know, I've got friends and relatives that see what I'm doing, and they know that I'm just like them, and if I can do it, then they can do it as well. So thank you for that. Means a lot to me.
And for anyone listening, the episode that's actually going live, so this is going up on a Tuesday, the episode that's going up on Thursday, I'm going to dive into just what my journey has been over even the last 3 weeks, because I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't planning this. And I actually thought it was going to feel incredibly different than it does. And so I just want to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and share with people what my experience has been like as well. So if you have not yet subscribed, make sure you are subscribed to the Entrepreneur Coach podcast. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple. You have a podcast player, we're on it. Find it, subscribe to it. Last but not least, Amber, if a listener wanted to connect with you or talk to you or contact you, what would be the best place?
Well, if they wanted to see our website, it is soundedtherapy.com. It's currently being revised, but you can also find me on LinkedIn as Amber Freeze.
Thank you so much for joining us today and just for being so open and transparent about your journey. It's been inspirational on my end, and also hopefully the listeners too.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Entrepreneur Coach podcast. I hope you gained valuable wisdom from this episode and have at least one thing you can act on today. As I always say, listening to this episode will not change your life. What you do afterwards will. Please be sure to leave a rating and a review of the show, and don't forget to share this episode with a friend or colleague who could use it. Last but not least, please have the audacity to believe in the inevitability of your success today. You deserve it.